One thing I want to mention while I'm right here, this taping business is all true as far as I can remember. It isn't accurate 100% because how can you remember all that stuff? Well, in 1916, had been working in the woods, and this fella come up there recruiting. He was a big BSer, and he told us boys what a great place the Army was, and they'd give us $1.10 a day. You know, we didn't know a thing anyway. We was only 18, 19-year-olds. And we all went because the other fella went.
I had known these tapes were in my family since I was 10 or 11 years old. I remember my father taking an entire weekend with a Walkman attached to his hip, listening to them. They were my great-grandfather's entire life story. We'd inherited them when my great-grandmother passed away. After my father was done listening to all 13 hours of the tapes, he passed them off to my uncle, who would be the caretaker. When I got out of the Army and went to journalism school, I remembered those tapes and I thought to myself, I really should do something with them. Another 7 years would come and go before I would have to do something that would motivate me enough to track them down. I had to make a thesis film for my master's in animation and digital art at USC. I'd been accepted to USC and received the Pat Tillman Scholarship on the premise that I wanted to learn animation to tell stories that had already transpired, specifically ones that would bridge the military-civilian divide. I remembered my great-grandfather had been in World War I, and I thought it was time to soldier up and do what I had been saying I wanted to do for years. So I tracked the tapes down, I reserved an audio transfer suite at school. They hadn't done a cassette transfer in several years, and I sat down to listen. I narrowed the 13 hours down to the 4.5 hours that were about the Great War. What struck me about this crackly, old, clumsily recorded audio was that my great-grandfather, Harry Dyer, had a similar attitude about war that I did, and we served 90 years apart on different continents. His experiences were much different than mine. He witnessed far worse events and got injured, two things that I was lucky enough to escape. But I could hear a sense of pride in himself and a few others, although I could tell that he thought 95% of the reasons behind his war were wrong. I guess I had been foolish to expect a lot of patriotic, back in my day type talk. He said something at the beginning of the tapes that was very salient. He said, the things that I mention here are all true as far as I can remember. They aren't accurate 100% because how can you remember all that stuff? Over time, our memories get fuzzy, and so does history. The quotes of generals and presidents, the atrocities and triumphs rise to the top of our collective consciousness. Filmmakers and illustrators put their own artistic spin on events in the name of entertainment or to highlight their own unique perspective. But just like the DD-214s that most of us have, if you make enough copies of copies, the detail is lost, and what was originally printed in the first place is often indiscernible.
And I thought I was going to die right there. I felt as my legs were blowed off or something. When I come to right there, I thought the fellas were Germans standing around me there. 2 German prisoners just took hold of my arm and helped me a ways there that day. Well, they're like everybody else. They didn't have nothing against me. They was sent in there by a bunch of pukes, you know, want to fight a war. And boy, that old Army crap, boy, I never liked that. And when I got out of the Army, I said, that's the last of that for me. We wasn't soldiers, we were just fellers, you know.
We hear incredible stories like the ones of Audie Murphy, and we see films like Lone Survivor, and we begin to think that all soldiers are gods sent to Earth to accomplish one thing. We forget that the majority of wars are fought by people who were recruited and just wanted to get through it so they could go home. We demonize and dehumanize our enemy to the point where we think there's some kind of special evil that can only be defeated through mass bombings. If you mix this phenomenon with enough political motivation and fear amongst the public, the result is history repeating itself. If you spread that out over 90 years, we find ourselves in Iraq. So what now? I found some tapes. I took 18 months to make a 6-minute film. I talked a lot about myself and my great-grandfather. But the person missing from this story and from my film is my great-aunt, Arlene Milton. She had the presence of mind to set Harry down for several days and record his story. She knew that what he had lived through, beyond fighting in the war, was historically important. His lifetime spanned the advent of electricity to intercontinental commercial air travel. In 2011, we lost our last American World War I veteran. He lived to be 110. According to the VA, we lose 492 World War II veterans each day. Of the 16 million that originally served, less than 1 million remain. So if my humble talk here today can influence one thing, it will be to inspire this audience to record their stories and the stories of their elders. You may not be a Medal of Honor recipient or New York Times bestseller, but that doesn't mean your story and your family's stories aren't important. If for nothing else than to preserve your family history, but hopefully to influence the perspective of generations to come. Because if we want to write the story of a better future, then we need to know the stories of our past.